keep your microphones on the mute icon so that there is no disturbance. Some of you still haven't done it. Aparajita, please mute your microphone. Okay. So, to begin formally, good morning to you all. It has been over a month, nearly 5 weeks, since we met for the last time. Aparajita, microphone mute karo. To be very frank, this is very uncanny because it is better to see so many of you together in class. But then we have to make do with this new technology and this unprecedented situation which has arrived because of the COVID-19 virus and the subsequent lockdown has now become one of the reasons for a wide variety of experiences which all of us are undergoing. Despite our age and knowledge and everything, we are all now on the same footing because all of us have to stay safe. So, you, families, and your neighbors will all have to be well and safe for the sake of each other. The most important thing now is that we have to reorient ourselves in self-disciplining, which is one of the prerequisites for being a responsible inhabitant of the globe, and we, I hope, have realized this, on which every living entity has equal rights of existence, and on which all of our well-being depends. Now, in order to be able to realize this, we are doing what we ought to do, at least most of us, and we are following the instructions of the government, which are coming from time to time. And if we follow the instructions of the government, then I hope that everything will become normal very soon and we will all meet each other. So there is nothing to fear. We should all be careful. That is most important. Now, as part of the endeavors of the Honorable Vice Chancellor of our university, Vidyasagar University, Midnapur, arrangements for online classes for the MA students in English, semesters 2 and 4, have been made by the university. You must have gone through the routine by now, so you know which teacher is going to take his classes at what time. And the teachers will keep you informed about their classes in the WhatsApp group, which you have. There is one request once more. Do not make any posts in the WhatsApp group, which will become problematic for you, the group, and all concerned. So be very conscious about the posts. It is best not to make any unacademic post in that group. As for now, this class, which is my first online class, shall focus on Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness, and the text I have referred to for a reading of the novella is the Penguin Classics edition with an introduction by Paul O'Prey. As you must have seen from the PPT which I sent you, that this introduction is very good. Besides, I have uploaded online learning material. Aparajita, can't you put your microphone on the mute mode? Just click on it and it will become mute. All the others, please. I have uploaded online learning material on Heart of Darkness in the Vidyasagar University website through proper channel, that is the computer center, for which I must acknowledge my gratitude to the persons in our computer center who have been working very hard to upload learning material and have been acting as facilitators between the teachers and the learners, that is between us and you. I also extend my heartfelt gratitude to Dr. Catherine Simpson, Assistant Professor, Glasgow University, Scotland, who has done her doctoral research on Joseph Conrad's works and who has been very glad to help you by sharing her expertise in the subject. She has sent 3 study materials, 1 PPT and 2 voice recordings, of which I found the PPT and the second voice recording have been already uploaded, and I shall find out about the first voice recording from the computer center after this class. Now, if you have seen or heard Dr. Simpson's study material, you will get plenty of relevant reference material for increasing your knowledge about Conrad and the prescribed texts. So she has actually provided for you significant quotations from the reference texts, some of which I have also recommended for you in my PPT, the first one, the part 1. From her voice recording number 2, you will know how she looks at Heart of Darkness as an adventure romance, about which she has discussed in the PPT also. As far as this lecture is concerned, it shall focus on issues related to journeying in Heart of Darkness. As you have seen, it will be very relevant to the PPTs which I have already uploaded for you. And for this, I will talk about 6 things. Number 1, journey in adventure romance. And I shall refer to Robinson Crusoe, a text most of us are familiar with as an example. Number 2, how Conrad subverts that notion and why. Number 3, the influence of Captain Frederick Marryat on Conrad. Number 4, what he does in the novella and why. Number 5, the different levels of journey used in Heart of Darkness. Number 6, how we receive the novella today. So let us see how much we can do in this one class. First of all, journey in adventure romance with reference to Robinson Crusoe. Now this idea of adventure romance is something which Professor Dr. Simpson has spoken about in her PPT and her voice lecture. And she says that romance as a form of literature has a number of features, and these are usually to do with a kind of other world which is created as a parallel for the reader. So it is another imaginary world to which the reader is transported. Now, when that romance genre gets compartmentalized into a subgenre called the adventure romance, then you will find that there are certain elements which are very specific to this particular kind of subgenre called the adventure romance. Here you have a hero who undertakes a journey and goes to a land which is unfamiliar to the reader. So now let us look at Robinson Crusoe. Robinson Crusoe is the hero who undertakes a journey which was supposed to be just an ordinary voyage, but there is a twist where the adventure element creeps in. There is a shipwreck and he finds himself on an island which is uninhabited. And this triggers off a whole range of informations which are embedded in the narrative which is retold by Robinson Crusoe to the reader. Therefore, it is Robinson Crusoe who is talking about his experiences and not Daniel Defoe, who is the author. Robinson Crusoe is a Britisher. So he is a white man who goes to an unknown island where later on we find people who are non-white arrive intermittently from time to time. Therefore, it is the white man's journey into a terrain where there are savages within quotation marks. They are non-white, therefore non-civilized. Therefore, they are othered if you look at it from the post-colonial perspective. So this othering is done very consciously by the author with the help of the hero, who then makes it his duty to sort of civilize the savages if he can. So you have Man Friday in Robinson Crusoe, who then becomes the noble savage because he has been tamed, trained, made proper within quotes, in order to prove himself suitable for the world of the whites, which is the quote unquote civilized world. These are some of the essential parameters of adventure romance. Now, then, we move on to the second point, how Conrad subverts that notion and why. First, I'll come to the why. You must remember that Joseph Conrad was not a Britisher. He was a Polish person. And Poland at that time was colonized, was occupied by the Russians. And his family had a very tough time. In part one, I have given you of my PPT the essentials which will become important for our understanding of the novella Heart of Darkness regarding Conrad's biography. So there we find that his father was a very conscious political activist, as a result of which the family had to move from place to place. So this element of not being fixed in one place, of journeying from place to place in search of a kind of livelihood and existence and subsistence, was there as a part of Conrad's upbringing. So the element of journey in Conrad's own life had begun right from the time when he was a mere child. And finally, when both his parents died and he was brought up by his uncle, he was sent off to France in order to train himself as a sailor. Because you know, again, that he wasn't a very good student, and the only subject in which he was interested was geography. So you see how his knowledge, his upbringing, his interests, all these begin to converge in the making of Joseph Conrad, the novelist. So after he got trained as a sailor, he went off to work in different merchant organizations. And the first of those, actually, in fact, he went on the 13th of October in 1874. His uncle Bobrovsky sent him to Marseille in France for training as a sailor. So after he became a sailor, you know, if you have read The Secret Sharer, then you will know best. If you haven't, no problem. You do not become the captain of a ship straight away. You begin first as a crew member, in which you have to be an apprentice. You will have to be the steward who will look after all the well-being of all the crew on the ship. You will have to prove that you are physically fit. You can take instructions. You can follow instructions. You can give instructions. You can lead a disciplined life in teamwork. Because once a ship is on sea, then the world of the ship is the world of the people on it and nothing else. And in order to do their work properly and in order to survive during natural adversities like terrible storms, a very disciplined teamwork is very important. So one has to prove that he is an able seaman. To be an able seaman means that you will not be sick when you are on sea, and you will carry out all your orders and follow them and give orders properly. After this, you will become the third mate, which is the lowest rank as an officer. After that, if you are good enough as a third mate, then you can be the second mate. And after that, you can be the first mate. The first mate sometimes is also called the chief mate. And only after being a very good chief mate can one be selected to be the captain of a ship. Therefore, when a person becomes the captain of a ship, that person has actually gone through all these phases of training as a seaman. From being a seaman, an apprentice, a steward, a third mate, a second mate, a first mate, or a chief mate, he then becomes the captain of a ship. Joseph Conrad had finally become the captain of a ship. So his experiences as a seaman particularly on ships which traveled to the far east, to the Malayan region, or down. He had been to Mumbai, he had been to Chittagong, he had been to different places in Malaya, in Bali, in Borneo, in Cambodia, in Vietnam. He had been to all these places. So he has been sailing across the South China Seas before he gave up his career as a seaman when in January 1894 he gave up the life of a sailor after nearly 19 years. And he tells us, as you will find in your PPT, that the reasons for this are his poor health. So he discovered that he was no longer an able seaman. So he gave up his occupation as a sailor. There were unavailability of ships which he would like to work on, and he wanted to concentrate on a literary career because in 1895 his first novel, Almayer's Folly, had already been published. Excuse me. And it is in Almayer's Folly that he used his pen name Joseph Conrad for the first time. So the first novel also introduced to us the person we know as a very great man of literature, Joseph Conrad. So in 1890, let us go back a bit. He had a 3-year contract with the Belgian trading company, and he went off to the Congo region to serve as the captain of a steamer. And the experiences there formed the staple of Heart of Darkness. And it was during this time that he became friends with Roger Casement, who was an Irishman who strongly advocated human rights. So Joseph Conrad's friendship with Roger Casement at this time is also very significant for our understanding of why and how he wrote Heart of Darkness. The reasons behind it subverting the normal adventure romance novel, which was being written right down from the 18th century when Daniel Defoe was into it. There were others. Why did he come to think of subverting this subgenre? Is because of all these reasons. So one is he was always a journeying man. Number 2, his experiences as a sailor. Number 3, is joining the Belgian trading company and going to the Congo region for this purpose. So that is very important. And when he went to the Belgian Congo, he became good friends with Roger Casement, and this friendship lasted even after they returned to England. And now to go to the Belgian Congo now as a way of digression. You know that Leopold II of Belgium, he was the emperor of the Belgian Empire, but what he did was he bought the Congo region, which was densely forested, because at this time the whole of Africa was being intruded upon by the Europeans. They were making inroads into this so-called dark continent. Dark again is both literal and metaphorical, because dark, most of it was impenetrable, so it was dark. Metaphorically, it was dark because it was the unknown. It called for adventure. But simultaneously, what was not said was that it was rich in natural resources, and the inhabitants were so ill-equipped to face the onslaughts of the Europeans. Will someone please switch off his or her? Thank you. Please mute your microphone. So they were ill-equipped. The natives themselves became resource material for a very nasty trade, the slave trade. And that again calls for a very long narrative, which I will just mention, but not go deep into. The slave trade was horrifying. You have plenty of literature and information on how notorious the slave trade had become right from the times of Queen Elizabeth herself. So the slave trade was not new. And you know, today's black Americans and other black persons in different parts of Europe are the descendants of the one time slaves who were trapped and carried off in the ships to be sold in new colonized areas, particularly in the two Americas, North and South. Along with these persons who were sold as slaves, the other things that were taken away from Africa were the natural resources, the most important of which were ivory. The African elephant, unlike the Indian elephant, has very long tusks, exceptionally long tusks, and the quality of the ivory of the African elephant is much better than that of the Indian elephant. So, the Africans, because they were unable to resist the Europeans, themselves were taken off as commodities, and the elephants were brutally killed in large numbers. And if you are interested, you can just go to the internet after this class and browse the net to see how ivory was actually heaped in small mounds, sometimes large mounds, only to be shipped away to Europe for making various artifacts for sale in the European market. And as a result of this, even today, you have a country called Ivory Coast. The name itself tells you what was done in those times and how this place got to get its name. And in our story, in the novella, Mr. Kurtz is a man who is actually engaged in collecting ivory. So he is the man, again, like in romance narrative, who is like a father figure. He is a knowledgeable man. He knows a lot more. He is a mysterious man. And in order to reach him, the hero makes a journey. It is usual in these romance narratives that this old man dies towards the end or disappears towards the end, because the reader will have to know that even if he wanted to, he cannot access this person. So this is pretty interesting. The same pattern happens in Heart of Darkness. Mr. Kurtz, who is a knowledgeable person, is there. But then, how is this subverted? We'll come to that soon. Now, to get back to Conrad's biographical details. When he went up the Congo, in his personal experience, he did meet a man who was there as an agent, but this man was not like, mute your video. All right, I keep the video on, but mute the microphone. But this man is not like Mr. Kurtz, who was modeled on a different person. Now, to get back to Roger Casement. Roger Casement had a very important role to play, I believe, in the formation of Heart of Darkness as a subversion of this adventure romance subgenre. Casement made extensive investigations into the atrocities that were made against the indigenous natives in Africa, and he recruited and supervised indigenous workmen to build a railroad which had to bypass the lower 220 miles of the Congo River. Now, if you have taken a look at the PPTs which I sent to you, you must have seen, I have borrowed pictures from the internet, that the Congo River, as is described in the novella, is like a snake. But then it is also very broad, and it has a number of cataracts and waterfalls which make the river impossible to navigate. But then the Europeans had to transport all the things that they were collecting in the deep forests. Therefore, a railroad was very necessary. And this railroad was actually being built by a person like Robert Casement, for which he engaged the natives to work on. I have also mentioned a video which you can take a look at, and that video is exactly this railroad which had been built by Robert Casement. And this railroad is a kind of shadowy background of our own novella, Heart of Darkness. So, Casement, when he wrote about his experiences in the Congo region, all these got published, and it is known as the Casement Report of 1904. So, the Casement Report was in the stage of being prepared when Heart of Darkness was first published. Now we move on to Herbert Ward. Herbert Ward is another person who met Stanley. You remember Stanley and Livingstone, these two persons. And when he was interviewed for the post of the newly founded Congo Free State, let us get back to the Congo Free State. The King Leopold II of Belgium actually bought this Congo Free State for himself. Congo Free State is not a colony of Belgium. Please remember this. It is not a colony. It was the private property of Leopold II. And he behaved like a very ruthless owner of this place. What he decided was done there. And his ruthlessness was extended basically to the natives who were compelled to work for him. And this ruthlessness finally resulted in his trial and sentencing to death. That is also there. So Herbert Ward also left the Congo region finally, and so that's it. Now let's get back to what Conrad does. For most of his work, you find that he has been resorting to his experiences as a sailor. So, researchers and scholars have dealt in great detail about the extent to which Joseph Conrad has used his personal experiences in his fictional work, because on the one hand we are saying that this is a fictional work, but on the other we are saying that he is going back to his personal experiences to create them. So all works of fiction cannot grow out of nothing. Please remember that. So he depended on what he knew, somewhat like Jane Austen, who also depended on her personal experiences to create another world which would be more refined and would also carry, very importantly, the message which the author wants to put forth to the reader. For the first, it is the contemporary reader, but later on, if the work really stands the test of time and becomes a canonical work, then to subsequent generations of readers and maybe readers in other countries like you and I, who are reading Heart of Darkness in 2020, so far remote from the time of Joseph Conrad. So the context has changed, the experience and knowledge of the reader may be different, but we will have to see whether the text still retains its validity for the reader as it did when it was first published.
Hello.
Yes, do you have a question?
ম্যাডাম বলছিলাম যে অনেকে আপনি কি লক করে দিয়েছেন?
না তো।
অনেকে বলছে করে দিয়েছেন ওই জন্য অনেকে জয়েন হতে পারছে না।
তাহলে মনে হচ্ছে ম্যাক্সিমাম পৌঁছে গেছে, জানো। আমি তো বাবা লক করিনি। ইট ইজ ওপেন। Just let
Hello,
me.
ma'am.
Yes,
Meeting
hello.
madam locked.
No, I haven't locked it. I have done nothing.
Hello.
Hello, hello. Can
Hello,
you hear
ma'am.
me?
I have a question.
Will you ask questions after I have finished? It would be good. All right,
Okay,
keep
okay.
your questions. Ask the questions afterwards when we finish. Okay, so what does he do here? He subverts that notion of the adventure romance. Because here we have a white man, Marlowe, a Britisher, who is making an adventure journey into a very interesting place, the heart of darkness. And he goes to meet Mr. Kurtz, who is the knowledgeable man. But Marlowe is a man who is very sensitive to the colonial endeavors, the colonial project. He is a part of it, but he does not approve of the way in which the colony exercises itself in most parts of the world. And the choice of the Congo Free State, which is also known as the Belgian Congo, where Leopold II had been so brutal towards the natives, is very pertinent. Then Mr. Kurtz is a knowledgeable person, no doubt, but it is also mentioned that he did not shy away from resorting to any kind of means in order to get what he wanted. That again is not a praiseworthy activity in the colonizer. So here in this novella, the colonizer appears at least in two distinct forms and many other indistinct forms. The most distinct forms are the atrocious behavior of the manager and of Mr. Kurtz. They are both very cruel because they are more interested in their personal aggrandizement, in their personal gains. And that is why Brussels is referred to in the novel as a whited sepulchre. Whited because of the ivory trade and also maybe because of the skin of the Europeans. And sepulchre, you know, is a place where dead people are to be kept. Now, the influence of Captain Frederick Marriott on Conrad was great because Captain Marriott, excuse me, just a second. Just a second. Yes. Captain Marriott was also documenting his experiences of seamanship, and this had actually inspired Conrad to do the same. And he used his adopted language of English in order to do this, and we know how Conrad has mastered the language, particularly to express two things. Excuse me, let me close the door. Yes, sorry. To express two things. One is his understanding of human nature, particularly when people find themselves in strange and strained, strained circumstances, which are removed from normal social human life. This is one thing which he keeps on harping on in almost all his work, his novels, his short stories, where you find that people, the way in which they keep their cool, the way in which they interact with others in very strange circumstances. The other important thing is his description of water bodies and seascapes and riverscapes during different times of the year and during different parts of the day. These are very beautiful, and these add to Conrad's description of the journey motive in heart of darkness. Now, what he does in the novella, therefore, is to bring forth to his reader a number of issues. He raises many issues. It does not appear, as many scholars, including Professor Dr. Simpson, have said, that sometimes the issues are just raised. Conrad himself is very confused regarding the solutions, if any, to the issues which he raises, and these issues are therefore expressed through the experiences of Marlowe, which are shared with his small group of listeners. Now then, is Marlowe's group of listeners only that specific group? Or don't you think that because of this narrative technique, Conrad is actually allowing, or allowing, I think, would be a little high-handed, is inviting his reader to be just another participant in that small group of listeners on the yawl Nelly, on which Marlowe sits with his cross-legged, with his palms upward, arms outstretched, as in the position of a Buddha, and begins his narrative. You also become a part of it, and you follow the narrative as he recuperates what he has already experienced. So you are one of those privileged to listen to what he has to say. That is one thing. Therefore, in this novella, what is he doing? He is bringing to you Marlowe's mind as he experienced the real experience then. Number two, as he is re-experiencing it when he is narrating his experience to his listeners. Next, the way in which his listeners are taking what he is giving to them, which includes the reader as well. All these taken together bring forth certain elements which, at the turn of the century, when this novella was written and published, was actually anticipating modernism, as you find in many later novels by Conrad himself, by Henry James, by Virginia Woolf, by James Joyce, to name only, and D.H. Lawrence, of course, to name only a few. He was dealing with the theme of alienation. He was dealing with what happens to a person's psyche when he finds himself in very adverse situations. The basic instinct of a human being for survival is always there. And this is followed with the instinct to study and get knowledge from what is happening around that person, particularly to human beings around that person. And from here creeps in the post colonial aspect of this narrative. So, all these issues have been raised there. The narrative technique itself is very modern because it is not unilinear. There are many strands which are woven into one, and this becomes very apparent in the motive of the journey, which we deal with in the second part of the PPT, which I had given to you. And I have mentioned there that this motive is employed on various levels. These levels can be cognized separately. At the same time, they are entwined in the narrative in order to offer a holistic appeal to the reader. And then I have given you all the details regarding that voyage up the river and how Conrad's own voyage. Then I have given you details about Marlowe's voyage. And when I have spoken to you about Conrad's own voyage, as I was surfing the internet to see if I could find anything interesting for you, I came across this very interesting learning material, Geography and Some Explorers, written by Conrad himself. Frankly, this is available on the internet, but I thought I could make it available for you so that if you want to, you can read it on your own. And this comprises part 3 of the PPT which I have given to you. So the third part of my set of PPTs is actually this particular learning material which I have tried to make available to you. Now, there is one thing which I have tried to point out to you by way of using pictures, that is the contrast between Conrad's own experience projected through Marlowe in the study of the two rivers which form very important aspects of this novella. He is telling the story when he is sitting on the cruising yawl Nelly, and I have given you a picture of what a yawl looks like, so you will know what kind of a vessel they were sitting on. This cruising yawl Nelly is something which would not work up the river Congo. For the river Congo, you need a steamer or a barge, as we call it. So there are two different kinds of vessels which you need for the two different rivers in question. And when you look at some of the pictures of the Thames, you will find that along the banks of the Thames, you have those wonderful colonial buildings, massive buildings, which are signifiers of British power and what they call civilization, and how they project themselves vis-a-vis the pictures of the Congo, wild, natural, full of the unknown, the mysterious, the untamable. All these are there in these pictures. So the two rivers are not just rivers, they are two signifiers of two different kinds of life which were going to have an interface in the novella. That again is a very important aspect of this journey motive. So this journey is not that a single person is traveling to meet another person. This journey motive also brings together the contrast, the very, very obvious contrast between the European center within quotes and the African other, which the empire, including the British Empire, wished to project in their own way, and which Conrad subverts, because he is not a British by birth, he is a British by adoption. He had become a British citizen, prior to which he had tremendous experiences of what it was to be like when his own country was occupied and dominated by someone else. So this pain of being oppressed, the pain of being dominated, was embedded in Conrad. Therefore, he was so sensitive that he brings out the very sorry state in which he found the African people and the African country in this novella. So to be very frank, when we speak about the journey motive and we tend to leave out the post-colonial interpretation of the novella, I don't think it would work, because one is very closely related to the other. It is definitely a post-colonial text. For the time being, I will stop there and we can come back. If you have any questions, please ask them one by one. So just switch on your microphone and ask the question. Give your name, your roll number, and your question one by one. Put up your hand so that your friends can see you. Someone had asked a question first. Who was that lady?
Hello, ma'am.
Yes.
Colonizer representation of two states. You said that. Hello?
Colonization?
Hello?
Yes, I can hear you. Go on.
Representation of two states. Two state or two states?
Two? Yes, colonization is representation of two states of human existence. One is the colonizer, the other is the colonized. And here, normally, say for example in Robinson Crusoe, It is the colonizer's high-handed representation to show how the savage can become a noble savage in order to find a small place in the world of the colonizer. But Joseph Conrad is questioning that very strategy of the white man who is the colonizer. Does the white man have adequate equipment to go ahead with this kind of an oppressive torture upon the other? That is what he is questioning through his representation of the reality which was being imposed by the white man on the black natives of Africa. So they are actually the two aspects of colonial existence that he brings side by side by way of contrast. I think I have made myself clear. Any other question? Ask whatever you want to.
Hello, ma'am.
Yes.
And the meaning of
Yes.
hello.
Yes, I can hear you. You don't need to switch your video on. You can just start your audio. Come on. Hello.
Ma'am, the meaning of darkness.
The meaning of darkness. Yes. Darkness here.
Symbolic.
Yes. Yes. Your question?
The symbolical meaning of darkness.
Yes. The symbolic meaning of darkness.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. The symbolic meaning of darkness. One is literal. It is truly dark because it is impenetrable. There are dense forests. And before Livingstone had gone there and he had actually started living with the natives over there until Stanley went and found him. So that is there. It is truly dark. The other darkness is that it can be metaphorical because the people out there are in the dark about the progress of civilization, which is represented by Europe. That is one thing. But don't you think that Conrad here also wants to imply that the darkness is not in the lifestyle, the living standard of the natives as represented in the novella written towards the turn of the 20th century? Is it not the darkness in the souls of the white men? Nearly 100% of whom were all Christians, and the Christians were told by Jesus Christ to love thy neighbor, to show brotherhood towards humankind. Then why were they behaving in this outrageous manner with other people whom they treated just even worse than animals? So, wherein lay the darkness? This darkness, therefore, is also a spiritual darkness. And the spiritual darkness can only lead to an understanding of the light, which is at the heart of this darkness. And what is that light? That light is something which all of us realize at one point of time or the other, for which there is no need for language, there is no need for education. It is an understanding which we are understanding now during the lockdown and the COVID-19 threat, an understanding of the meaning of life, an understanding of the meaning of existence. If you wish to survive, you must learn to respect others. If you wish to make your life meaningful, then you must make other people's life meaningful. You must respect others in order to be respected. This is the basic understanding of life which we all get at some point or the other. That is the light. So the darkness has to be penetrated in order to understand that life, capital L-I-F-E, is for everybody and it must be respected. Kurtz or Mr. Kurtz learnt it when he was dying. Marlowe learnt it through him by seeing what had happened to him so that he could get back to quote unquote civilized society and share his experiences with them. So, darkness in the title of this novella is therefore very significant. Next question.
Hello, ma'am.
Yes, please.
I am Sir Akhtar Ali, roll number 27, ma'am.
Welcome.
Ma'am, just want to know what was the experience of Karj? What he learned from there, and what he influenced Marlowe.
All right, to get to that, I will say T.S. Eliot was very fond of the report of the young African man, the young boy, who was very cheeky, in fact. He comes and tells Marlowe just 4 words, Mr. Kurtz, he dead. That was all.
Yes.
But in this, you have a lot of information. The death of Mr. Kurtz gives a finality to what he was. He became the past. But when you think of what he was, you also can see what he did. He was ruthless. He was capable, no doubt, but he was, extremely ruthless. He went to any extreme to get what he wanted. Regarding women, he had no respect for them because, as you know, there was the intended waiting for him in Europe and there in Africa. He had a hectic affair with a native woman who herself was very mysterious. Both the women were tremendously dedicated to Mr. Kurtz, but he, I doubt whether, had any feeling for the 2 women so important in his life. Mr. Kurtz represents
Who are
the
2 women?
tremendous, aggressive, ruthless, heartless endeavors of the colonizer into the heart of darkness. So he penetrated the heart of darkness, but light came to him only when he was dying. Before that, he was absolutely insensitive to it. And therein lies the difference between Marlowe's journey and Kurtz's journey, because both of them had journeyed to the same point. Kurtz goes first. Marlowe follows him to go and get him. But when Marlowe gets him, Kurtz's journey is over. Marlowe's return journey still remains. So, Marlowe, because of his spiritual enlightenment, because of his sensitivity towards humankind, can survive what Kurtz could not. Alright, so that is Kurtz's significance in the story. Any other question?
I have a question.
Yes.
Is there any resemblance of Dante's Inferno with Marlowe's voyage to Congo?
Of course, if you want to, there is, because it is a very good question and it has been discussed by scholars in many places that just like Dante, who goes down to the Inferno, so too Marlowe makes a journey to the heart of darkness. Just as Dante returns, Marlowe also returns. But for Dante, there was Virgil, who served as his guide. Who is going to be the guide for Marlowe? For Marlowe, there is no guide. He has to fend for himself. So then, you could ask 2 questions. Number 1, is Conrad Marlowe's guide? The other, does Marlowe need a guide? Because he is also one of the first men in literature who will be followed by many others as representatives of the modern man, representatives of alienation. For Dante, alienation was not important. He was making a spiritual journey. But for the modern man, a spiritual journey is also a journey one has to make for himself. So, For Marlowe, then, Virgil was not required. He was the modern man taking his own spiritual journey. All that he could do was to share his experiences with the others if they were interested to listen to what he had to say. So if you listen to Marlowe, then Marlowe serves as your Virgil in the journey to the heart of darkness and back. That would be the correlation between Dante's Divine Comedy and Conrad's Heart of Darkness. Then again, you could also say that if you are talking about the journey to the Inferno, then there would also be anticipated the journey through Purgatorio, because that is what happens when he is sitting on the Nelly and narrating his story. He is back to this world, the world which is familiar to the European, and the anticipation of Paradiso, if possible. So then, not only the Inferno, the whole of the Divine Comedy could become relevant for Heart of Darkness. Any other question? Thank you. Any other question? We have just around 3 minutes left before I think DB sir has his class at 12 o'clock, if I'm not mistaken.
Ma'am, he's not taking our class today.
Okay, then it's fine. Any other question? Any comment?
Madam. Hello, madam.
Yes, please.
I am Bapi.
Yes, Vapi. Your friends are smiling.
My question is actually from this text, this very novella, The Heart of Darkness, can it be defined or can it be explained with the help of class concept?
With the help of?
Class concept.
See, you hold your mobile phone a little away from your face. I can still hear you. The microphone is very strong. Yes. Now ask the question.
My question is, madam, that this novella, The Very Heart of Darkness, this novella,
Yes.
can be explained or can be defined with the help of class concept. The
Class
typical
concept means Marxist concept, Marxist theory. Are you talking about Marxist theory?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, of course.
Marxist theory.
Yes, of course. From the Marxist perspective. Very good. A good question. You can have a Marxist criticism of this because the very basic premise of Marxist thought is class conflict, class awareness, and everything to do with the stratification of society. And here we find that even among the Europeans, there is stratification, don't you think? Because you have the accountant who is a very smart man. There is the manager with whom he does not see eye to eye. This man Marlowe is yet another white-skinned man, but he is being treated as the other among the whites by the accountant. So among the whites, there is classification depending upon the knowledge and the status of the person engaged by the empire in that particular place. So when he goes to the outer station, from where he moves to the inner station, he experiences this class distinction among the whites, which Marlowe resents. And of course, there are the blacks. Even among the blacks, there is class distinction. It is much wider and much varied. There are the cannibal savages. There are the natives who have been roped in, who are being made to work, who are not being given proper food, and who are being left to die when they become incapable of working. Among the natives, there are some who are trying to get closer to the whites so that they can have a better standard of life. So all this is there. You can have a very good Marxist critique of the novella. You can look up the internet, Bapi. I would suggest that you can write a small paper for this, and if possible, we can have a publication on your classes during this lockdown. You can write small essays, don't make them very long, and you can edit them, and you, Bapi, can have a paper on a Marxist critique of what do you say, Heart of Darkness. And for this, I would ask you to refer to Dr. Simpson's both her PPT and her voice recording, in which she refers to one Marxist critic about whom you must have heard, Terry Eagleton, Professor Terry Eagleton, who has also made a critique of Heart of Darkness. So that will be a very handy book for you. I think she has given a few lines from Eagleton too. So you could refer to that and do some write-up as an exercise on a Marxist perspective of Heart of Darkness. A very good question. Thank you. Anything else?
Madam,
Hello, ma'am.
Yeah?
Hello, ma'am.
Yes, please. Come in.
I'm Subhash Kundu.
Okay, Subhash, hello.
Ma'am, can this novella be described as spiritual voyage of discovery?
Of course, it is a spiritual void. It is a spiritual void into the a voyage into the heart of darkness. It is a voyage of discovery, but whose discovery is it? Mr. Kurtz, Conrad leaves it out. I mean, he just mentions it and leaves it to the reader. If you are a true believer and you want to believe, then well, Mr. Kurtz has his own realization. If you are not, then you can leave him alone. But of course, it is Marlowe's realization. And it is Marlowe whom we are following. Marlowe is following Kurtz. But we are not following Kurtz. We are following Marlowe. So for Marlowe, it is a spiritual voyage of discovery.
Okay, ma'am.
Any other question? Okay then, shall we call this meeting off?
madam.
All right.